Good evening. This is the Lake Bluff School District 65 Board of Education regular meeting, October 23rd, 2012. Terry has agreed to be our Secretary Pro Tem this evening. Terry, can we have a roll call?
Mary Jane Brady.
Present.
Terry Carney, present. Leanne Charlo.
Present.
Mark Berry.
Present.
Susan Ryder.
Present. Great. Thank you. Okay, shall we say the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First, we have communications and questions from visitors. Looks like we have a visitor who wants to communicate.
Grim Reaper.
Sir or ma'am, if you'd like to address the board, please state your name and address.
Gould. I am from a land, another world, a school district far, far away. I'm here tonight to tell you all about the Lake Bluff Ghost Walk. The Ghost Walk will be this Saturday and Sunday. Tours are beginning at 6 p.m. until 9 p.m. on Saturday and 5 p.m. until 8 p.m. on Sunday. We'd like for you to support this fundraising effort of the Lake Bluff History Museum. Tickets may be obtained online at www.ghostwalklakebluff.com. Or you can go to the Lake Bluff Museum. Any questions? Thank you and good night.
I guess I'll be able to talk to my family as well.
Any other questions or comments?
Nothing can live up to that.
We have paper copies of Plan CD.
They're right up here.
They've got, they're all the bunch together. Good.
Yes, you are.
Okay, and at this time, why don't we have the PTO report? I see we have Vice President Ann Stewart here this evening.
Thank you. A lot has been going on in the month of October, that's for sure. First of all, Pumpkin Fest turned out to be a big success. We raised about $23,000. There's still some money coming in. We're hoping to hit 25 for the 25-year anniversary. We served 400 people pizza, and North Shore handed out 300 hot cocos on Friday evening. And this year, something new was the Raging Kitchen food truck. So I don't know if any of you had an opportunity to try that, but very yummy food. Chase had a record number of fun run participants of 306, and the 5K had 223 participants this year, a very strong showing. Big thanks to our volunteers, Croya particularly, and the National Honor Society did a phenomenal job for us. Next is the Innisbrook fundraiser. We've raised about $5,000. The delivery will be November 14th at Lake Bluff Middle School during the Holiday Boutique from 5:30 to 9 p.m. The directory, the print version is on sale at the PTO web store, $5 each for that. Spiritware, it's on sale now in the PTO web store for the December 21st delivery. People can go to www.lb65.org/PTO to order Spiritware. Teacher appreciation took place during conference time on Thursday, and all teachers were given personalized notepads. At LBES, they had Chipotle lunch, and LBMS had a silo dinner. And book fair took place at the same time at LBES. The fair sold $12,811. $3,108 of that is profit. And scholastic dollars were used to buy teachers all books from their wish lists. So we spent about $3,400 of our scholastic dollar money. We have about $8,000 left to spend. The yearbook is on sale until November 14th in the web store, and Time Travelers takes place November 19th. And then LBMS, Dine and Donate, is Mondays in October and November at Wisma, Innovasi, and Maderno. We get 20% of sales from that. Yearbook sale through November 15th, same with elementary school. And then the 7th grade parent paddle tennis party will take place November 9th from 7 to 10:30 p.m. And lastly, the Holiday Boutique takes place November 14th at LBMS from 5:30 to 9. There will be 20 vendors, and the elementary school choir will be presenting a nice little song for everyone.
Great.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Also at this time, Bill, would you like to give an update? Bill Melsheimer from ECRA is here to give an update on our strategic planning process.
Thank you. Bill Melsheimer, Senior Associate at the ECRA Group. Good evening. We're off and running. We have completed our individual phone interviews with all board members. Last Tuesday morning, we met with the administrative team, had a good session, and last Wednesday spent the entire day at Lake Bluff Elementary School, meeting with faculty and staff. Tomorrow we'll be meeting with a group of parents first thing, and then spending the rest of the day at the middle school, meeting with faculty and staff. Next Monday evening, there are 3 evening sessions with parent groups, community groups, and a week from Thursday morning, we'll be meeting with local governmental officials. And so we're looking forward to all of those sessions and continuing the process of gathering information in phase 1 of our strategic planning process. So that's it. Any questions?
Good. For the strategic planning. Good. Any questions from anybody on the board? And we have some information on the table over here about our strategic planning sessions, so if everyone would please stop by and grab one of those on the way out, we'd love to have you there at one of our meetings.
Right, and it would be very, very good to RSVP to Liz so that we know how many to anticipate for the 3 evening sessions. So,
Bill,
thank you.
Would it be helpful to tell audience and people at home what to expect in these meetings? How they work? How you run them?
Well, first of all, we begin by introducing ourselves and discussing the fact that what is said is confidential in nature, and that no individual names will be presented in the report that we present to the board and administration in February. We discuss group norms, how we're going to function during that session, and then we get into the topics of discussion. And essentially, what we try to do is enter into an individual dialogue with each person. It's not a group discussion. It's not a roundtable situation. It's focusing on good thoughts, words, and ideas and opinions from each individual. And we usually spend about 45, 50 minutes in a session, and we're able to get through very expeditiously and gather a tremendous amount of information.
Thanks.
Sure. Anything else?
Any other?
Good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I think we'll move on to our reports. Dr. Sophie, do you want to give any background on those?
First of all, we're going to have our audit presentation by Jane Lear, followed by, we actually have one of our committee members talking tonight about the Illinois Youth Survey results. From that, Dr. Wirtz and I are going to be presenting briefly what is on our school report card that will be posted November 1st, and then final remarks from you.
Okay, great.
Jane.
Okay, well, presentation is
a stretch on the audit report. You all got a copy of the annual audit as well as the auditor's letter, management letter. It was the first year for the new auditors. We employed the previous firm for about 7 years. And as I indicated to the board, I think it's appropriate for us to change auditors at least every 7 years. So Evoy, Kemp, Schulte, Jacobs and Company did a fine job for this first year. I anticipate we'll use them again for the next year. It was a very clean audit. They were in and out in less than a week, which is good. But I take pride in the fact that I think our books are very clean, and we try to everything we do is in preparation of the audit. Make sure we have good, clean books, and all funds are accounted for. They incurred no problems, and we're in good financial position. Questions on anything that you read, or I know it's a fun read.
Well, actually, I don't have any questions, but I would recommend it if you do have the time to read it. I mean, there's a lot of background information that sometimes it's a little confusing when you don't understand how levies are made and things like that, or how the funds are distributed and used. And I found, although it is lengthy, I have to admit, and it takes some time to get through, but if you take the time, there's a lot of good information. It gives you a lot of good background information about the operations of the district. So I think that's really useful for anybody who chooses to read it.
Also, accompanying this is, we do get the annual financial report, which is filed with the State Board of Education. This is on the district's website as well, so anyone can access that. And of course, we do get requests from time to time for a copy of the audit, and that's always available from the business office.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Jane.
Dr. Wertz, Illinois Youth Survey results.
I'd like to introduce Carly Quick, who's a social worker at the middle school. She serves many purposes in the district in many roles, and Carly works closely with the Student Assistance Program Coordinator, who works at Lake Forest High School, Deer Path 67, and Lake Bluff 65, to coordinate all activities in the social emotional wellness realm, to make sure the districts are doing similar activities, taking all the good activities and using them community-wide. She also serves as a liaison to the community to make sure we're involved and aware of different task forces and committees and things like that. So I think it's real appropriate that Carly, working in the schools, tells you about our youth survey for this year. This PowerPoint will be posted on the district website tomorrow morning, and it will be under the board reports for today's board meeting. Carly? Thank you.
All right. For the sake of time, I'm just going to kind of move quickly through this PowerPoint, and there might be some spots that you want to go back and review a little bit further, but I'm happy to answer any questions at the end. I'm glad that we're presenting today because we're actually right in the middle of our National Red Ribbon Week campaign, which is an anti-drinking and drug use campaign, awareness, prevention, all those great things. So it's actually a perfect tie into that. The Illinois Youth Survey is a statewide survey that's used with students to just gather a lot of important information, which I'll go over in a second. The website's there if anybody ever wants to check that out. So the things that are covered in this survey, we're gathering information on drug and alcohol use, substance use, beliefs, perceptions of that substance use, and then also various things regarding health, nutrition, feelings, bullying, depression, things of that nature. Family rules and conversations and things like that are all gathered in this survey. We actually have been doing this since 2006, and each year we have been bringing more and more grade levels into the survey. So as of right now, we're surveying all students grades 6 through 12, with the exception of people who are absent on the day of the survey. We did get a pretty good representation. And the basic results are that we are seeing continued low rates of use in our 6th and 8th grade, or 6th through 8th grade, I should say, which is nice. It's relative to our past data. And pretty consistent. We don't have any comparison data with our 7th graders because this was our first time assessing them, but we're looking pretty standard with our numbers. Thank you. Next one. Yeah, go ahead. So this is the one graph that, now it's important to know that all these numbers are non-use numbers, so when you see these high bars, that's actually a good thing. And we are, the bars are us, and then the dots are the Lake County 8th graders. So you can kind of see there the different numbers in terms of binge drinking, alcohol, cigarettes, marijuana, things of that nature. And then we also added we have a big push in this community about prescription drug use, and so we did add some additional questions on that. And as you can see, we have some pretty good numbers there, although we do think it's important for people to be aware, because these types of substances students have a lot of access to, just in their parents' bathroom or in their own bathroom, so just something for people to be mindful of when they have things like this in the house, to just be aware of. That's what we wanted to mention.
Carly, that previous slide, that said, if I'm reading that right, that's say 12% of the kids have done, in 8th grade, have binge drinking experience?
I don't think that was binge drinking. I think that was alcohol use in the last 30 days. I think the binge drinking one was a little, we can go back, it's one more back. The binge drinking was 96 non-use, but 88 for alcohol use in the last 30 days. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Keep going. So something that we also look at is just that initial age of onset when they're taking that first drink or smoking that first cigarette. And we're not seeing a lot of that at the middle school level, which is nice. But what we did want to point out was that for those who did report use, parents with permission was the most frequent response as to how that had happened. So again, we just want parents and community members to be aware of, and I'll get into a little bit more some perceived norms in a second, but just that parent piece of talking about it and permitting it or approving of it is a big piece that we want to focus on. So since our numbers are, fairly good, why do we still want to do this? Why do we still want to look at this information? Because there are a lot of risk and protective factors with peers and family and community activities that we do want to focus on for the prevention piece. So one being participation in activities. If students are involved and, with sports and church and service clubs and things like that, they're much less likely to engage in risky behavior. And we have really good numbers in terms of participation in activities, so that's great. And also just the family rules and conversations about drug and alcohol use and students' perceived level of disapproval from their parents is also very important. So 85% of our 8th graders are saying that they think adults think it would be wrong if they did that. So that's good, and that's something that we always want to keep working on. Some information from the high school survey that we thought would be interesting to point out in terms of the parent approval and disapproval. For those students who perceived that their parents did not disapprove of what they were doing, they're much more likely to have drank alcohol in the past 30 days, to report easy access to drugs and alcohol, to obtain it from their parents with permission, and also feel less risk associated with that use. So again, we're seeing this very important piece of parent approval versus disapproval is reflected in the numbers of use. Next, please. And then peer norms, a good thing is that all the way through 8th grade, we're still seeing it as being not cool to use drugs and alcohol, but the older they get, the more that number goes down. So we're kind of trying to keep those norms high. This is not what we want to be doing. It's not cool. And moving on to some of the other things that we assessed, bullying was a big one. We have seen some great decreases in 6th grade, which is, I think speaks to all the great programming, things that we've been doing through the elementary school and then into the middle school. Our 8th grade is fluctuating a little bit, and some of this stuff is, I think if you can go ahead and go to the next graph, you'll see that name calling is one of the, this is for 6th grade, name calling is one of the most popular ones compared to the threatening or the physical things. We're at much lower than Lake County levels, which is nice to see. And then if we go to 8th grade, the next slide, you'll see kind of a spike in especially the name calling and the verbal stuff is something we're always kind of trying to target and work towards. School climate was a really interesting thing that we looked at, and our numbers look pretty good on a scale of 1 to 4. We're looking pretty high with just students perceiving, caring adults in the building, high expectations, school connectedness. If you go, that's in 6th grade. If you go to 8th grade, you'll see there's similar numbers. And with that third slot, that meaningful participation being a little bit lower, those are things that we're working on right now, getting our students more involved and having a more active role in some of the things that we're doing so they do feel like they're having a say. And then the piece about mental health and depression that we ask, we find important just because we want to know where our kids' heads are at and what they're experiencing in terms of this, because depression is a huge risk factor for substance use. So our numbers are lower compared to Lake County, which is nice, but definitely something that we will be putting some efforts towards. So in terms of those next step efforts, we're going to continue to develop our emotional wellness initiative programs, Red Ribbon Week being one of them, an online reporting system that we're going to have for bullying and social emotional concerns that it's going to be rolling out soon. That's really exciting. Increased programming throughout the community with parents and other districts just to really make sure that we're kind of all coming together on this. And like I said, that student involvement piece, raising that up and getting that going, and the just kind of community coalition group that's going to be happening with middle school is a work in progress as well. And that's going to be, again, building things at the middle school level and even some at the elementary level, because the idea is that if we kind of bolster them at this time, they're going to be less likely to make some poor choices in the future. So it's a highlight. We had a lot of support, obviously, through this whole initiative, and I'm happy to answer any questions or any comments you guys might have at this point.
I mean, I think that it's great to see some positive trends, but I also see some of those numbers, and I'm just glad you're continuing the effort. You know, particularly some of the bullying numbers and the alcohol use. You know, it's concerning.
Definitely, and I think that it is good information to have because it kind of helps us focus on, you know, where we want to put our efforts, and knowing that while we are in a great community and we do have relatively low numbers, there are still some areas that we want to be keeping an eye on and programming to get those up even higher. But yeah, I hear you.
Carly, I want to commend you. I'm copied on the emails that you sent out on all your different activities in the building, and I'm very impressed. You have a lot of things going on for kids.
Thanks.
I'll be curious. We'll have to have committees together to figure out. The state has a new mandated satisfaction culture building test that the webinars are just out next week, so it's brand new, and we'll have to figure out where that coordinates in with this, because this is very valuable information.
Yeah.
Very important. So thank you for all your efforts.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have our ISAT report. As we're getting set up for this, it's very important to note that the Illinois school report cards, which are published in the newspaper usually right after November 1st, our obligation is to present to the board prior to it going public. The scores in this report, though, are really a snapshot in time on the days that the kids are tested, and usually that's in the month of March. We get initial scores back usually sometime around August. And then we start really taking a look at the data to see what we can do to improve instruction. But if you think about it, the kids that were tested in March are all in different grades by the beginning of the next year. So really, this is more of a reporting type document. And it's important as a community and especially for our board to take a look at just these general scores and overall trends. Dr. Wirtz and I are going to just briefly go through. I am going to talk about the demographics, so everybody has a little bit of just understanding on what's happening here in our school district. If you start on the front page, we have about 81.7% of our students are white, and the next highest subgroup is our Hispanic group, which eventually could play into some of our test scores as far as developing subgroups. Our percent low income is 9.4. Our percent limited English is 3.5. Percent IEP is 11.5. Our total enrollment as of the time that the state did this report was 906. Some other things that are in this report that you can always get off of this. They give ratios, pupil to student, and pupil to teacher, pupil to administrator. They have average class sizes on here. One of the things I'd like to point your attention to is the time devoted to teaching core subjects. That's something that we may want to look at down the road. It also has something to do with how we report out on, for instance, students may be in a reading class, but they may be reading history material. So do we report it as social studies time or do we report it as reading time? So that's going to need to be something we come back to in our strategic planning. On the next page, it talks about our teacher information. This is always something I look at to make sure that our teachers really mirror the student population that we have. The majority of our teachers, obviously, they all have their bachelor's degrees. That's, and then we go on and talk about our teachers. 68% have master's degrees or above. The next one, we have teacher administrator salaries. We have expenditure by functions, and those are always good things to look at in relationship to our budget and in relationship to all of our other financial doings. Then finally on page 3, before I turn it over to Dr. Wertz, this is our information for budget year 10-11. The state is always a year behind in our school report cards. So it talks about our revenue by sources and our expenditures by sources, and then has our instructional expenditures and operating expenditures. Again, while the test scores were just for this past spring, this information is for 10-11 school year. They have a big section in here on the NAEP, which is the national testing. If you really read into it, only state reports are reported. So there's really no individual information for you on how our students did with that. And now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Wertz, who's going to talk to us a little bit about overall student performance.
Thank you. Okay, one more page, Jane. We talk about the overall student performance. It rates the entire school district. One score is reported with the NAEP test, and the second score, you see that we did about the same as we did in 2010, 2011, and the same thing with the ISAT reports for 2011, 2012. There's no statistical difference in those two reports. The next reporting section breaks it down by grade level. And overall, the district in reading increased scores in third grade. The district in math increased scores in third grade. In fourth grade, the district scores in reading, math, and science all increased. So we saw positive gains in all areas of those tests, and that's due to, remember, teaching kindergarten, first, second, third grade. For each grade, it's a cumulative effort of the teachers previous to that grade. In grade 5, we saw a slight positive in reading and a slight decline in math. We right away looked to see what are we doing to address that issue. And as you know, last year you adopted a new mathematics series. This year it is fully implemented and fully articulated. We've had a consultant working with the teachers to work through all the units to prepare them to be ready to implement the curriculum as written and support them in that implementation. In sixth grade, we saw positive gains in both math and in reading, and then a kind of a more significant gain in math, or a 6.9% gain. In seventh grade, we saw a slight decrease in reading and a slight decrease in math with an increase in science. So again, we look at programming, what are we doing, what can we do differently, we look at what we're doing in reading in each grade level. Curriculum consultant Joanne Trahanis has worked with the seventh grade reading teachers who are both new this year, the language arts teachers, and their curriculum is aligned and articulated and fully in place to look for positive gains in that area. And the same thing in the math program in the middle school has also changed, as has the one in the elementary. In eighth grade, we saw a positive increase in reading and a decrease in math. And that's where a lot of time and effort has gone into, again, to the new math curriculum with Agile Minds and working through the different levels of algebra, making sure students are prepared at each grade level and that all materials presented within that year that it's expected to be presented. So Joanne is well aware of that. We've had the math consultant here already 5 days this year to work with teachers to make sure that we're on the right track to make sure those math scores are trending upward and the students are presented the material they need. especially in preparation for the Common Core, which is changing our tests. The next page talks about the percentage of students tested, and we test 100% of our students, so the only students who may miss a test are those who are sick or away from the district during the 2 weeks testing period, but we don't hold any students out from testing. The next several pages break down each grade level, and they talk about the enrollment, the gender, the ethnicity, and the subgroups. You need to have more than 45 students to create a subgroup, like a limited English proficiency, or students with disabilities, or students who have free and reduced lunch. And those scores are all broken out, and we're not going to take time to go through those scores step by step, because the report card will be available publicly. I believe the district version of this will be on the website tomorrow on the district website. The others will be available on the building websites. So if we go to page 16, Jane. As you know, with NCLB, every district was charged with fully educating, and getting all students to perform at the 100% level by 2014. This year, the target goal for every child in every school district was to meet or exceed at 85%, which we do very well with our general ed population. However, our students with disabilities, if you can scroll up just a little bit, Jane, this year scored at 66% in reading. And this includes every student in the district that has a disability, students with cognitive impairments, students who are autistic. Every student in the district is tested in one way or another, and their score is wrapped into this score. We have implemented many new programs to address these differences in learning styles and the gaps in the education, and we are slowly making progress, but not at the level that we need to be at 85%. The state does...
Are there districts that you can go to that are meeting that standard that you can learn from, or is everybody missing that standard today?
Many districts are currently in this status because it's very difficult to move students with cognitive impairments to that 85% level.
Right.
It isn't very many students, so you
One student can make a huge difference.
one student can make a huge difference. Yes, a huge difference.
And I have not met a district yet that with this subgroup is high. And that's something we all need to be working on. Because our job is still to deliver the curriculum and find that access to their education for them. So we have to work through it, but if you note on page 16, we did not meet the safe harbor.
Right.
And Mark is right, 1 or 2 students could make a world of a difference.
We do really believe our new math program will help this, and this was the area that we did not make adequate yearly progress with this year. And we feel like with we actually have 2 new math programs, thank you to the board for providing those to us, that we, so far, the initial results, as you heard in a memo a couple weeks ago, are extremely positive with high numbers of students. And we're working to continue to implement those, and actually working with the math consultant who comes to work with everybody in the district. She's also working with the special ed teachers and the special ed, looking at individual students to see if she has any students who we have found resistant to the interventions we're offering or more struggling to learn. We're working with her to what's different, what can we do differently to better impact student education and learning. So we have called in experts to try to close the gap and have worked with other districts and haven't, actually some people are coming to us to ask about what we're using because we've gotten good results. So we just want to keep that positive trend going to try to educate all the students to their fullest potential, which has always been our goal.
But our classes are so small.
Yes.
That if you have a group of 6th graders this year where you've got 3 or 4 kids who really excel at math, sort of outliers, and then next year you don't have those, it can make it look like the program isn't working as well. Even though it's just really because the class is so small, you can't get a meaningful average in a way. Yeah,
yes.
Good sample.
Yeah.
I think if I want to draw your attention before we wrap up on this to the very top, this is a very important thing for all of you to look at. On
Scroll
the
up
top
a
of
little
page
bit, Jane,
16.
to get to the top of that page.
Is this district making AYP? Now, AYP is still the language that we're working with right now. Illinois applied for a waiver to kind of set its own rules for AYP, and they were denied at this point. We're still waiting to hear if the federal government will approve that for this year. So we're not making AYP as we know AYP this year. Is the district making AYP in reading? Yes, they are. Are we making AYP in math? No. So math is the area. Have we been identified for district improvement according to No Child Left Behind? No. That's another key part. And then when you look under federal improvement status and state improvement status, we have nothing in that box. If by some chance AYP is still in this district or in the state next year, we may be in a different box. We feel strongly that our math is going to be taking a very strong positive turn in achievement, because as we work to implement this math, especially with our math consultant coming in, we're going to get positive results. But there is a very sequential process to go through with AYP, and we'll just have to wait and see what the federal government says as far as are we going to stay on it or not. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the fact that when we go off of AYP, the program that we're moving to is called 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-star programs. So districts will be a 5-star district, a 4-star district, a 3-star district, and you will get different points for how many subgroups made this and so many subgroups made that. There's a lot of dissension amongst school administrators about that, but we'll have to work through it. There was a lot of dissension when NCLB came through also.
Two-part question. Is, from the chart I'm looking at down lower on that same chart, it looks like the problem with AYP lies primarily with the students and disabilities area, right?
That's correct.
And that's to reiterate the point about percentages and sample sizes, we're talking about a very small number of kids.
Very small.
Can you put it in context, the number of high-performing districts, or you may not, we haven't gathered the data, but are other high-performing districts having the same kind of problems?
And we don't have the school report cards for any other district yet. They're only privately open to the district.
But
They're not out to the
qualitatively,
public.
your
So,
conversations with peers in the
Yes,
industry,
they're-
I've heard that it's a very difficult.
It is, because it's a very difficult target to mark,
Yeah.
to make with students with disabilities who have, especially those with cognitive disabilities. They learn at a slower rate, but we want them to learn as much as they can learn. We want every student to
Yeah.
learn as much as they can learn every year. And other districts have the same problem.
So it's common, but that's not a good enough answer.
No,
for
not
all
an
of us.
excuse, but it is
Right.
not an uncommon problem.
Right.
And the only other thing was the last page talks about the federal improvement status, which we are not in status, but it just identifies that we have 2 schools in our district, and we have both schools are classified as Title I schools, and that goes along with your free and reduced numbers of low-income students. Did you have a question? I'm sorry.
I did. I just wondered if this was the only discussion tonight about the school report card, or are we going to circle back to it during town hall, or?
We will not be circling back on it. This is the only discussion this evening.
Okay.
We can easily put it on the November COW meeting and bring it back for further questions.
I just had a couple of clarifying questions, because I just want to make sure everybody understood it. The budget numbers that are in this document cover the 2010-2011 school year.
Correct.
Yes.
The ISAT numbers that we've been talking about cover the testing in the March 2012 timeframe. Correct. Okay, so there's a mismatch between years of budget numbers. It's in the same document, but it's 2 different school years, right? Okay, I wanted to make sure that I understood that. Then you had pointed out to us, and I know that the document that's going up on our website at least will have corrected the first grade numbers, average number of first graders, right?
Correct. If
You had pointed it out, and it'll be on our website correctly, but if people go to the state website, it will show 30 average as our
Correct.
average school, first grade classroom, and it's 20.
It's 20,
Right.
yeah. Or
Right.
it was 20 of May 1st,
It was 20
2012.
in
yeah.
that year, right? And then the other thing, and I just wanted to identify a possible issue that this afternoon in my studying these numbers, I began to uncover with Jane. And there, Jane, I don't want to speak out of turn here, but there is possibly an issue on some of the numbers on expenditure by fund in 2010-11. And we don't need to go into that, but I just want people to understand that when they look at those numbers, that we are re-examining them. And Jane, is there anything further you want to say?
Those numbers come from the annual financial report as was filed with the State Board of Education. And last year, the auditors did file it, but we found an error and asked them to amend it, which they did. But the report card doesn't pick up the revised, corrected AFR. It picks up the original AFR.
I want to just point out into the microphone what it was that you just said, Jane, because you didn't have a microphone, and I'm probably not well-versed enough to speak to this issue, but I know that people are very concerned about our...
I'll repeat it. I got a microphone.
Oh, good, thanks.
Okay, the original AFR, Annual Financial Report, filed by the auditors, they filed it on our behalf with the State Board of Education, was in error last year. I found the error, asked them to amend it, they did, that's what we have on file in our office, filed it with the State Board of Education. However, the State Board of Education did not pick up the amended Annual Financial Report for the report card purposes.
Okay.
I don't know why at this point in time.
Because this just came out, so we haven't had a chance to go back to the state.
Yes, we just got this today, correct.
So as I understood it, and this was this afternoon, as we were trying to discern this, a line item where they say that we spent $13,300,000 ought to say $11,652,000 in that school year, 2010-11, and that's indeed what our revised numbers showed, but did not get translated into this school report card, correct?
Correct.
And that number, if it were correct, would change the cost per pupil in that school year, correct?
Correct.
Okay, as I understand it, we're going to try to get that corrected, but given all of the attention that is given to these numbers recently, and given the comparative ability that people will have when other school districts publish this same information, I think it's important that we understand that these numbers were corrected by us with the state, but they did not reflect correctly in the state and the school report card. That's my understanding currently. We're looking into it, but I just wanted everyone to be enlightened the way I was this afternoon.
That concludes our report. Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay. Last is President's Report, and I don't have anything this evening except to remind people that after we finish this meeting, we'll be conducting our town hall meeting. If we could please keep it down so that we could finish our business, and then we'll go on to our next meeting. Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to action. Our first item of action is to approve a contribution of $3,250 towards the Lake Bluff branding project. Could I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on that?
So is this an initiative that we began, or are we joining an initiative that was begun by others?
We are supporting the village in their initiative because all of us are going to gain from their branding project.
Okay.
The Park District is involved as well.
Yes.
Park District, Village, and us, and of the total cost of the project, I'm understanding that it's 5%.
We're contributing 5%.
So our
That was
$3,250 is 5% of the total
their
spend
cost.
on the branding project.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions or discussion? Terry, can we have a roll call?
Mary Jane Brady?
Yes.
Terry Carney, yes. Deanne Charlo?
Yes.
Mark Berry?
Yes.
Susan Ryder?
Yes.
Great. Next is our consent agenda. Each month, the board can choose to place items that are either recurring, such as the approval of minutes, annual responsibilities, such as the appointment of school treasurer for the next year, or items of a regulatory nature that must by law be approved by the board. These items can be combined into one motion and passed together as part of a consent agenda. The board regularly screens its consent agenda each month and removes motions from it if, in the board's judgment, they might otherwise require discussion or public comment. The items on our consent agenda this evening are special meeting minutes from September 24th, 2012, morning minutes, special meeting minutes from the afternoon, September 24th, 2012, regular meeting minutes, September 25th, 2012, budget hearing minutes, September 25th, 2012, committee of the whole meeting minutes, October 9th, 2012, special meeting minutes, October 11th, 2012, destruction of closed session tapes for April 5th, 2011, April 14th, 2011, April 20th, 2011, April 26, 2011, the P-card report, the bills payable, the treasurer's report, and the activity reports. Could I have a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second. Any questions or discussion? Can we have a roll call, Terry?
Susan Ryder,
Yes?
Mark Berry,
Yes.
Leanne Charlo,
Yes.
Terry Carney, yes. Mary Jane Brady.
Yes. Okay. New business? None. Anyone with new business? Okay. Old business?
We do have, we have to make a decision on who your board delegate will be for the III conference. I've been told that that meeting will be occurring at 3 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, that weekend. You've done a lot of hard work on your board training, and in order for me to be able to apply for a recognition award, we do need to have attendance at this.
So this is the meeting, down in Chicago on the
Right.
weekend before Thanksgiving.
Right. It's the Saturday at 3 o'clock, the weekend of the tri-conference.
Is that conflict with other classes that were being offered at that time?
Yes, there are breakout sessions during that time, so it's giving up one of your classes to go. It's very interesting because many of the school districts spend some time writing resolutions for things that are very meaningful to them. And I think attendance it's interesting to come back and report back to your board. Do we have any volunteers? I cannot go. It has to be a board member.
I can go if you want.
Good job.
Sounds like Mark will be going.
Everybody else step back.
Check with Ellen.
The only guy left standing.
It is
I
interesting.
was not going.
Remind me when we're there, okay?
I will remind you.
Any other old business? All right. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved at 7:34.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.
What we want to do is make sure everybody's got handouts before we move into the next one.
All right. We'll be starting our town hall meeting here in just a moment. Does everybody have handouts for the information that we'll be talking about in just a few minutes?
Yeah.
There's a front row up here. We can, I don't know if Jane.
People watch on. They hear these numbers. Why are we spending all this money and we're not looking at what
I don't know what her name is.
to get that last little percent? It's hard.
It's really difficult. Yes. And the same thing, we always struggle with boundaries to go with the positive.
Mark, why don't you move over this way? And Ann, let's move this way. Maybe if we switch over.
You betcha.
Then we might change. Up here. Does she need a seat or no?
She's got a seat. Then more people can sit in the front row.
Or if we could just put our things, maybe?
There's seats in the front row.
I'm just going to move your stuff down to my spot, and then I'll move my
Now,
stuff.
where's my, okay, this.
This what you
This
want?
is what I'm gonna need.
Okay,
And when I signal to you, you know what, I'm gonna hand it off.
okay.
When I signal to you.
Can we turn your phone so it doesn't ring?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's not, it's off.
Oh, okay.
If I signal to you to hand it out, you just get up and hand it
To the board or to the people?
to the people.
Does the board have this? Okay, you want me to give it to them? Or you give it to them?
You can pass out the board ones. Do you need anything? Okay. Do you need anything?
Bob Schieffer coming to moderate.
I thought the same thing last night.
Good evening. This is the Lake Bluff School District 65 special meeting. This is a town hall meeting, October 23rd, 2012. Terry Carney has agreed to be our Secretary Pro Tem. Terry, can we have a roll call?
Mary Jane Brady.
Present.
Terry Carney, present. Leanne Charlo. Present. Mark Barry.
Present.
Susan Ryder.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming to the meeting tonight. We'll be hearing some of the options and combinations of choices that have been developed for the board to consider as we look at our 2012 tax levy. That's the levy that will determine taxes that you receive, tax bills that you receive in 2013. The board will be listening to questions and comments, and will take them into consideration in our upcoming levy discussions. We heard in detail some of the information that you'll hear tonight at our Committee of the Whole meeting on October 9th. Some of that information will be revisited tonight, and there will be some additional information, which most of you should have in the handouts. In addition, based on comments and questions from the board, several new options have been created since that October meeting. These options will be presented by our administration and a representative from PMA, our financial consultant, prior to public questions and comment. Dr. Sophia will now let you know some of the details of how the meeting will work.
Tonight, we are having one of our first town hall meetings. The purpose of this meeting is for the citizens in our school district to be able to hear the options that our Board of Education is considering in relation to the levy, and to hear the different options for you as citizens and taxpayers, and allow you to ask questions of our presenters and share your feedback with our board. Jane Lair and a representative from PMA are here to give a brief presentation on several options for consideration. There's been a multitude of options to consider. One thing remains constant, however. We must provide the best possible education in the most fiscally responsible way to the students in Lake Bluff 65. At our Committee of the Whole meeting, administration presented options A and B, and then based upon board feedback and community comments at the October Committee of the Whole meeting, Plans C and D were developed. And the packet that was up on the table, it looks like they're out, will be posted tomorrow on our website, along with all the other documents from tonight's meeting. They're posted now. They're posted now. C, D, and E. And as Jane and I and our advisors and our company, our different companies that we're working with, have been working on this, we found that another option kind of rose to the top. And a Plan E was developed that just went to the board yesterday, so this is the first time they are also hearing about it. And again, that's on our website. We feel that this may be one of the best of the plans that we've examined to date. All of these plans offer some degree of decreasing the district's fund balance, as well as offering tax relief to the community. Cost containment and cost reduction are also going to be considered as we move into our budgeting cycle, which begins after the first of the year. There's no more important job than educating our children by providing them the skills to work and thrive in a 21st century world. We want to thank all of you for coming tonight and participating in our town hall meeting. The board is here this evening to hear your comments and ideas about some of the options we will be presenting regarding the upcoming tax levy. As I've stated in past meetings, being good role models for children is very important to not only our school district, but for me very personally. We need to demonstrate civility and have respectful discussion, and sometimes we may agree to disagree. This evening, a forum will allow you to comment or ask questions. Please keep your comments and questions to 5 minutes. After others have had a chance to comment and question, please feel free to come back and comment again if you so choose. Tonight's meeting is not intended to be a debate. Board members will be listening to your comments and questions. They will be asking questions themselves and listening to all of the discussion. And with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Jane Lair. Jane, we have a lot to share, and then most of our time tonight will be in discussion and questioning.
Okay. I will try to get through this very quickly. Microphone.
It's got it.
Sorry, Herb. Okay. I'm going to try to get through this as quickly as I can so we can get to our community so they can say what they need to say and ask questions. I'm going to very briefly review Plan A and B again because we went through that at the last meeting and many of you were here for that meeting. Plan A, as we indicate, was a target of aggregate fund balance, and by aggregate fund balance we mean the total fund balance for the education, operation and maintenance, transportation, IMRF, and working cash funds combined. So we developed projections based on this target of having a 70% fund balance as a ratio of total expenditures by fiscal year 2018. And so just briefly, and I'm sorry that this is so difficult to see, we're going to go to the bottom line here. And what you can see is this is fiscal year 2014 by abating debt service payment 1 year and adjusting levies somewhat, we get the fund balance down to 95% and slight decline each year towards our goal of 72%. That was Plan A. Plan B, our target was 50% fund balance, again abating debt service payment and adjusting the levy somewhat. And we got for Plan B, as we reviewed last month, aggregate fund balance for the end of this next fiscal year at 93%. And again, continued decline, trying to get to 50%. This is really not 50% because of working cash. That we continue to grow to about an $800,000 fund balance at the end of fiscal year 2018. That was Plan B, kind of. Now then, a new plan is C. And this time our target was to cut $3 million from the 2012 levy. And please know, we are really focusing, we've got projections so the board can kind of see should the assumptions I make play out, should they continue to take certain steps in future years, this is what the future could look like. However, we're really focusing on the 2012 levy because that is the only decision the board can make this year. And actually it's two-parter. You've got to determine the 2012 levy for the 2013-14 fiscal year, and you've got to make a decision on debt service abatement, if any, or for how much, et cetera. So we're going to focus on those two things because that's the action that the board can take this year. So for Plan C, we're cutting $3 million from the levy, and by cutting $3 million, we mean versus last year's tax dollars received, extensions, and abating debt service. So with that, we would realize, based on our estimated equalized assessed valuation for the 2012 levy, $12.4 million in tax revenues versus the $16.1 we got this past year for the current fiscal year we're in. The current rate, and these are the tax bills that everyone paid this past May and September, the rate was $2.50 for the school district. We would see that rate drop to about $2.03. So there's immediate tax relief, and as you'll see in the aggregate, not only are you going to, would the tax bills, tax rate go down, but here's the effect on the aggregate fund balance. We see it drop to 87% for the first year. Here's your debt service abatement. And then should future boards take the steps as outlined in the projections, we would see fund balances fall as low as 37% in this scenario. Okay? I'll just outline because these are going to be similar. Beautiful, thank you. That wasn't a bad thing. Revenues are going to change from plan to plan a little bit. Expenditures are based on the assumptions we've made. So for the fiscal year 14, that's next year, it starts next July, I'm projecting out expenses to be virtually the same as the current year budget, very little change. And then an average growth over the next 4 years of about 1.5%. So those are based on those assumptions that we went over last board meeting. Okay, Plan D. This time the target is to commit to 5 years of debt service abatement. And by commit, I mean we transfer 5 years of debt service all at once from the education fund into the debt service fund, because we have to make the payments, principal and interest payments from the debt service. You do it all at once, which means you're committed for those 5 years worth of payments immedially, rather than reviewing it from year to year.
So that money's gone, you're saying? If
Well,
you choose that option.
it's been restricted now to use only for debt service payments. Okay, and the purpose for doing that was to try to show you an illustration of really pulling down that reserve fund and the education fund down quickly, and to show a commitment to do this by this board, which would commit future boards for five years to do this. Okay. Also, to go ahead and continue and lower the levy as well, to spend down reserves to a target of 50% by 2018. Under this scenario, for this levy, for 2012, we're cutting the estimated extensions money we receive to $13.7 million from this past year of 16.1, and the tax rate, which your bills are calculated on, would drop from 250 to 224. So, under this scenario, bottom line, here aggregate fund balance drops to 53%, and then future levies are such that we try to maintain that 50% fund reserve ratio in aggregate of all those funds we mentioned earlier. And here this shows you the large transfer of funds out of the operating funds, which will be in the debt service fund to make those future payments. Now, in looking at these two and analyzing it, and I asked PMA to run another projection, and that's what we're calling E, and that's the most recent one you just received. And it's kind of a hybrid of the two. Plan E, instead of 5 years, we committed to 4 years only. And again, we want to lower the levies sufficiently to spend down the reserve to the target of 50%, okay? What that does is it still substantially lowers the 2012 levy, which lowers the rate from 250 to 220, so it's about a 30-cent drop in the rate based on our estimated EAV, because we won't know that till next April. But it's a significant change in the levy, which has a direct effect on tax bills, lowering tax bills because it's going to lower the rate, as well as abating the debt service. Debt service represents approximately 20 cents of this 30-cent drop, so there's also an additional 10-cent drop in the rate by levying lower. And what that does is Just to show you the difference between revenues and expenditures, for fiscal year 2014, we are deficit spending, which means we're using up reserves based on, and these are all estimated, we don't have a budget yet for this year, of a little over 300,000. The following year, a little bit, 160,000, and little surpluses here. So what it does to the fund reserves, the first year, because we're only doing 4 years of abatement now instead of the 5, we drop the fund reserves down to 64%, and they fall slightly down towards our goal of 50%. Again, it's higher in total because working cash, which is a reserve, fund reserve for you, it's a savings account with some limitations. We continue to grow up to about 800,000 by the fiscal year 2018 under this scenario. What the board needs to focus on, again, I'm going to just say it again, the 2012 levy is the only levy you can act upon right now. It's the only levy you can control right now. You cannot tie the hands of future boards. You can't determine future levies. You can make a decision on debt service abatement in several ways. What Plan E is what administration is recommending to the board to evaluate to do. Number one, we're going to lower the levy. Number two, we're going to abate debt service. That means we're going to tell the county clerk, don't extend taxes for the debt service payments. Don't collect money from the taxpayers for that. We're going to use our operating funds to pay that. That's what this $5 million represents. And you're committing to that under this scenario to do that for 4 years. 100% of those payments each year for 4 years. So it's two decisions for the board to make. One is the 2012 levy, because you don't levy for bond and interest payments. So you determine the levy, which means dollars to use for next fiscal year's budget. And number two is to abate debt service at some degree, whether it's 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years. And if it's 100% of each payment for each of those 4 years. This represents 100% of the debt service payment each year for 4 years.
Jane, could you also share that what our attorneys have advised us, actually several law firms, about a tax rebate?
Yes, because that's been asked by at least one board member. We can't rebate taxes. We can't write checks back to taxpayers. That's not an option for a school district. So the only way we can provide property tax relief is in the future, and that's by doing one of two things or both things that we were talking about here, and that's abating debt service, using existing funds to pay that so we don't collect more money from taxpayers to pay the debt service, and number two, lowering the levy to have impact on tax rate and tax bills.
And that's under the advice of counsel.
That's two legal opinions plus a bond company. It's just not an option for us as a school district.
So, should we let's do any board questions first, and then we'll start opening up to the community.
So I guess since we always are saying this excludes working capital, what makes us believe we have to increase the working cash fund? How do we determine what's sufficient? Is it a percentage of expenditures that makes you comfortable? Since we do have reserves to fall back on as well. So I'm trying to understand why we have a working cash fund with
Because the working
reserves.
cash rate on the tax rate is less than half a cent. We collect about, I think, $40,000 a year on it. You can give it up if you want to. It has virtually minuscule impact on the tax rate.
Yeah, I understand, but it's $800,000 it's projected to go to, and I'm just trying to understand why you need that in addition to the other reserves you have in each of the funds. How is one used versus the other?
Working cash can loan money to other funds. It can loan money to education, O&M, and transportation. Should there be a need, then they have to pay it back within the year. There's rules that you have to pay it back after your first collection of property taxes. If you want to abolish the fund, you can do that, which means you move that money one time only to any of those three funds, and then it's gone. So it's a choice. You can use it in times of need to borrow to cover some expenses, but you got to pay it back, or you can abolish it and permanently wipe it out.
So, Jane, I, as you know, wasn't able to make it to the October 9th meeting, and so today and or earlier in the week, you and I have been playing catch-up, and so I would like to try to articulate what I think you told me so that everyone here can see something other than little numbers, if that's possible. So there's two ways we can reduce taxes. One, by essentially telling the county that we don't need to collect a tax for abatement of the debt, right?
To abate the debt service, you file a resolution with the county that tells them not to extend taxes for debt service. It means they don't add that to the tax bill. They don't collect that money. The taxpayers don't pay it.
So it's
we
just
pay it out of
taken
operating
off of
existing
the tax
fund.
bill for
Correct.
that year. And
Correct.
You are telling us that that's 20 cents.
That's
About
approximately 20 cents of the total
Somewhere
rate.
between 18 and 20 cents.
Yeah,
but-
depending on the EAV, but I'm 20 cents.
Okay, so one thing that we know we can do next year is we can say, thank you very much, but we're going to pay our debt service out of reserves.
Correct.
Okay, and what we're saying here is that on Plan E, we're saying we would commit to doing that not only next year, but the 3 years after that. And that's why we would be moving 4 years' worth of debt abatement into a different fund. So it will no longer sit in a fund where we spend money, but instead it will go to the debt abatement fund.
Debt service fund.
Okay, debt service fund, thank you. So what you're saying is we would be committing that right up front, and although we are not typically binding other boards, we would be moving the money into the debt service fund where we anticipate it would stay for future use by future boards.
It'll stay.
Right. It has to stay.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's all it can be used for.
And so it cannot move back? No. Okay. So in that way, if we move money immediately, we would see just the 20 cents next year. We wouldn't see all 4 years in 1 year.
Correct.
So it wouldn't be 80 cents next year.
Correct.
It would be 20 cents each of those 4 years, right?
Committed to.
Committed to.
Correct.
For that part of it.
For that, right, for that part of it. So that's one way we can abate taxes. It's,
That's
or
one way to lower the rate.
lower the rate.
Immediately.
Another way to lower the rate is to impact the upper section, right? How much are we going to levy for operating expenses? Correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so what on Plan E you're showing is that we would levy, let me see if I can read this. We would levy 13.8.
No, 13.4. .8 also includes other
$1 million
local,
less next year.
revenues, interest earnings,
Those are 13 to
registration
12,
fees, et
so
cetera.
it's about $1 million less.
Oh, I need my glasses, clearly. So we would levy $1 million less for operating, and that would put us, if I'm reading this correctly, spending down reserves. If expenses stayed the same, and we'll get to that in a minute, if expenses stay the same, we anticipate that that would mean we would be spending down reserves by $300,000 on Plan E.
Correct.
Correct. Okay. So we have two ways under Plan E that we'd be reducing the levy. Is
Under
20
any,
cents-
I just want to make it sure, not just Plan E, under any scenario, if you want to provide tax relief, there's two ways to do it. Lower the levy, amount levied, and/or abate debt service payments.
Okay.
So A, B, C, X, Y, Z,
And
doesn't
what-
matter. If you want to do that, those are the two ways you can do
We're
it.
proposing a combination of both.
Yes.
Okay, so that makes sense. We cannot commit the future boards to how much we will levy in the out years, right? We can.
No, you can only adopt a resolution for levy for 2012 right now.
So this upper part of your chart, where we've said we will under levy by $300,000 the expenses we anticipate next year, right? The upper part is only for 2014 that we would be able to bind the school district. 15 and 16 and 17 and 18 are estimates going forward.
Correct.
If we were to follow a similar path.
Correct.
Correct?
Correct.
Okay. So let me, so this proposal would be to spend 300,000, or collect 300,000 less in the levy than we anticipate we would spend next year.
Correct.
And what you're telling us is that in the first year, Plan E would bring us all the way down to 64% of reserves.
Correct.
Right? So we would go significantly, I think, down from the 90s, where we currently are, to 64% in the course of one year. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, yes.
Okay. And what we've done in addition is we've said that 20 cents each year thereafter for 3 more years, 4 years total, we would be committing the board, or committing the school district to that tax abatement relief, right, or tax debt service relief.
Yes.
And, before I forget and cede the floor, the other way we reduce spend is by reducing expenses. And as I understood it from our discussion today, the time we set expenses is February, right?
Well, we start budget development right after the first of the calendar year for the following year.
So what we're talking about is what we can control now. December 2012, we can control to some extent. Everything is a little bit of an art because you don't know the EAV exactly, but we can levy an amount that will set us on this course for 2014, or whatever course we choose.
Yes,
right?
yes.
And then after that, after the first of the year, we then are working on the expenditures line, right? Go down 5, 6 lines to the second section. Thereafter, we're working on the salary and benefits. Things are a little bit topsy-turvy in state of Illinois world, like they are oftentimes, but we are setting the levy in December by statute, and then determining what the budget will be for that same year.
Yes, and let me add to this.
Please.
You're right. We're going to establish revenues, and then we're going to establish expenditures. Okay.
Yeah.
However, also, with the new leadership that we have, and with the very short time she's been here, and what limited discussions we've had, also, not only are we going to be developing next year's budget, but we're also going to be developing, partly through strategic planning, but also partly because it's our job, to establish future plans. Number one, staffing, and evaluating staffing.
Right.
Now, in my projections, I've not eliminated staff other than regular classroom teachers based on projected enrollments. So as we said last time, that's a 3.0 FTE change from now through fiscal year 2018. We may, there be additional staffing reductions, I don't know, but that's why we need to have a plan, number one.
Right.
And number two, you're only going to address 2012 levy, and then next year, we'll have more information projections, and the board can take more drastic action if they so choose with the next levy, or whatever fits the needs of the district at that time with the additional information and planning that we're going to be going through over the next several months.
So that's very helpful. So what we would be saying is that the line that's listed as salary and benefit costs under expenditures.
Yes.
Right? Would, of course, be subject to change over the years.
It
and what
will be
you've done
subject to
here.
change. Also, we're going to go into collective bargaining in another year, too. I'm making a huge assumption on how that's going to come out. I'm making a huge assumption on benefit costs.
Right.
So it will change. This is a dynamic, your projections are a dynamic document. It changes not only annually, it'll change more, but it's dynamic. It will change. My assumptions, God bless me, aren't going to come true on all fronts. I'm trying to be somewhat conservative. I've only built in a 5% increase in health insurance on these outlying years. I hope that comes to pass.
Right, right, right.
I hope that comes to pass, whether it's through collective bargaining and employees paying a higher percentage, or we get into a co-op and we can maybe reduce our rate or whatever, but that's what I built in here. I've built in no other staffing changes other than a 3.0 reduction purely based on regular classroom enrollment. No other assumptions are made. There's no assumptions made on anything else with staffing. I will anticipate changes will come down the pike between now and fiscal year 2018, but for this practice, to model something so you all can see what a particular path may look like, and for you to listen to your community, which you are all doing, to provide property tax relief without harming programs or services to children, that's why we're only focusing on the 2012 levy. Yes, these are projections. Yes, they'll change, and we're going to revisit this a couple times between now and next year.
Right.
So right now, you all can only focus on the 2012 levy and for some order of debt service abatement purely for tax rate relief and spending down reserves.
If I could add something quickly too, the other thing that will be impacting our decision next year is a board policy on fund balances.
Absolutely, because right now our target is.
This is our first step
Yes,
in
that's
getting there.
exactly right.
But this time next year, we'll have a strategic plan that's been developed and in practice, and we will also have a fund balance policy that's been approved by the board at that time. So the decisions we make next year will have other things impacting them that we don't have now. One of the things, Susan, I presume you're getting ready just to finish up so we can move on to questions. We may get some questions from the community that may address some of the specifics you're talking about. So I would say that I think it's time for us probably to move on to some questions from the community. Do you have anything to add before we start?
No. We ask our audience members to state your name and address. Come up to the podium or to the microphone so we can hear you.
I don't want to put my back to you.
Do we have another microphone?
Oh. Okay, where's the other one? Because I'll need to.
Pass it back and forth. My name is John Morrison. I live 220 East Prospect in Lake Bluff. I'm not sure I understand how you can formulate 5 or 6 different options without having a fund balance policy beforehand. And it's my experience, I mean, the Park District has a fund balance. We have a fund balance at the library. I've now done quite a bit of research with other school boards. They have fund balance policies in place, and it certainly doesn't take more than a few hours to put a reasonable fund balance together based on the research I've done anyway. So that's the first point I like to make. Secondly, I thought, Gene, a few weeks ago we talked about this, and you did not want to see the fund balance go below 50%, and yet I see no alternatives to bring the fund balance down below 50%. In fact, every alternative is roughly above 50%. Mm-hmm. So that seems a little odd to me as well. You've done a lot of work here, and I congratulate you on that. I think you've addressed some of the questions that our taxpayers have, and I think we're moving in the right direction. But one of the concerns I have is that we're focused completely on tax abatement here. And we've kind of lost touch, and maybe it's a future issue, something that you need to take a look at in the upcoming years. But when you look at the fact that we spend $20,000 per student compared to the rest of Illinois, which spends roughly 10, and in fact, I did a little research and found a school district that's almost exactly a mirror image of ours. I pulled up their fund report card. I have our fund report card from last year, which your new one isn't on the. They have 999 students. This is Norridge. School District 80. We have 937, okay? We have 76 teachers. They have 61. It's a difference of 15 teachers. That's about $1 million. School achievement rates are roughly the same. I didn't see much difference there. They spend on education $8 million. We spend almost 12. So I think there are differences there that need to be thoroughly investigated in a more serious manner in the future and go beyond what we've talked about just simply here with tax abatement. I actually called the school board president and had a long conversation with them just to make sure I was on an apples-to-apples basis, and I was. And the one thing that's a little confusing too, Jane, from my perspective, last year in this report, instruction was 33% of the total, and this year it's up to 53%.
That's an easy answer. Because in last year's report card, we spent over $6 million on construction costs, which represented 30%, so that made the percentage of all other expenditures less.
So you put that into instructional?
No.
I don't want to get into the details.
No,
If you've got an
because
answer-
over $6 million was spent for construction. That's in the total of expenditures. So instruction became a lesser percentage because of that amount of construction. This next year, it's like 52%, where it should be.
Okay. But in summary, I think we've made some good progress. I don't understand how you can make a final decision without a fund balance policy of some sort. And I would like to see the school board begin to take a look at the fact that our cost per student is considerably out of line with other districts. And I know there's a lot of detail involved in that. It's not an easy answer, and you may have looked at it to a certain extent, but it certainly looks awful strange when you compare it to other school districts of similar sizes. Norwich has 2 schools, 2 principals, 1 superintendent, very similar to our school district. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
My name is Neil Dahlman, and I have 2 questions first.
If you could also state your
Is there a
address,
significance
please.
to the 2018
Excuse me, if you'd state your name and address, please. Thank you, just for our records.
711 Bluff Road.
Thank you.
Is there a significance to the year 2018 that's in all the charts? It's 6 years from now, so I don't...
We usually talk 5 to 6 years in projections, so it's simply when you talk projections, that's how far we take it out.
Wasn't it also that was the earliest date the bonds could be called?
That's what I was
Just a
wondering.
coincidence.
That's coincidence.
Okay.
Yeah. It seems to me that there are 2 possibilities for reducing costs and expenses. One is what John just mentioned, and that's that our enrollment over the last 10 years is down 20%, but our expenses are the same. Our staff is the same as it was when we had 20%, that 25% more students. It seems that the expenses should be able to be reduced accordingly. Second is, I just refinanced my home. I'm now paying 3%. It seems to me that we could refinance the bonds. Now, there are some fine print in the bonds that they can't be paid off for probably, 4 or 5 more years. Well, there's a defeasance issue that could be taken advantage of. We have something in excess of, $20 million in bonds. We could use $10 million of the funds that are on hand to help pay off the bonds and, in effect, refinance with the bond issue at a significantly lower rate that's $10 million less than we have. The combination of doing that will not have a giant effect on us until that period ends, which is maybe 2018. But thinking about the future, is an option that could be considered. So there are 2 options. One is refinancing, and the other is just cutting expenses in line with the reduction in enrollment.
Thank you.
Do you want to address I'll address the cost containment, and I apologize for my voice, I think I'm getting that fall cold. As Jane had shared, and the way our budget cycle works, our budgeting doesn't start until January. And we will be looking at the way we deliver instruction. We will not be making quick decisions on that because we're talking about the education of each of our kids. There will be a lot of study on that. We pledge that we will be looking at our staffing levels. We will be looking at that in relation to enrollments. But that is not tied in right now with the levy. The levy, we've determined our revenue, and then starting, actually, after our levy is passed, we'll start talking about next year's budget, and we'll start talking about possibilities, and actually, Norwich superintendents are all friends of mine from my previous position, so, and that's something we reach out and find, how are you doing this, how are you doing that? I will also share that as we look at staffing levels, and I'm predicting that the pension reform and the pension shift will be occurring sometime in the month of January. That will also give us a more accurate figure in budget expenses. So one step at a time, and we need to be very thoughtful with all of these decisions that we're making.
Okay. Part of what you talked about was really the debt service abatement, using existing funds to make debt service payments, which we're addressing. The refinancing, we had a representative here from William Blair last time. The market just doesn't lend itself to refinancing the bonds right now, and that's where we talked about the negative arbitrage. However, that's something that the district needs to be aware of and constantly monitor the market, so at the appropriate time when it is feasible to do, they do need to look at refinancing the bonds. But right now, the market doesn't lend itself to do so.
Jane, by moving the money, maybe we don't know this, but by moving the money over to the debt service fund, would we close off any opportunity to use that money to help refinance the bonds?
No, because
Stay right there, Mr.
Stay
McVeigh.
close. No, and I've got the entire PowerPoint that I can send you that Elizabeth Hensley and William Blair went through this last time. And I wish you were here tonight to answer the question. But no, it would not affect that, because when you refinance, you're really refinancing the longest bonds, the ones that are payable out later in the issue. So this bond issue goes out to 2027 now. So we'd be looking at those bonds. But she went through to explain how what you do is when you defease those, money set aside in an escrow account. Well, it develops negative arbitrage. So like to pay off $10 million worth of bonds, it would actually cost us more than $10 million. In today's market.
Interest rate on U.S. Treasury bonds is so low.
Yes. But it's something to constantly monitor. So at such time that the market turns around, it's always something to look at to refund the bonds.
And Jane, William Blair is constantly doing that for us with our bonds, looking at the possibility of refinancing.
It's our responsibility to do that. No, it's our responsibility to call them and say, hey, take a look, run some numbers. Is this a good time now?
Okay.
Yes. Get the microphone, because you're on TV now.
I just recall from the last meeting when she presented that you had refinanced some of the bonds.
We did some in 2010.
So they have taken advantage of some of the lower interest rates since they were originally issued, and I believe the next opportunity wasn't till 2017 or 18.
And when she thinks the market will be appropriate time.
Because we have to wait for a call date.
Call dates, correct. Right.
It's David McIlvain, 318 Ravine Forest Drive in Lake Bluff. I'd just like to make a comment or two to underscore and support what John and Neil have already said, to focus on the high importance of expenditure control. If you look at the all of the spreads sheets that we've been given, the property tax levy by 2018, increases back to the level that it's at, today, resulting from, obviously, expenses that have not been, reduced. And I understand that's not been a major part of the study that's taken place so far. But I think it's very important for you to know, and I think you obviously can discern from the turnout here that there's a very high degree of interest in this whole subject in the community. So my question to you is, as you address the expense component of this whole process, to what extent will the public be involved with input, to get toward that end conclusion? And if you care to answer that now, I'd like to hear what you have to say, or if you want to give us an answer later on, why?
Actually, there's two answers to that. As we move forward to a strategic planning, we will have some committees working on different aspects of that. But the other big piece is through the budget, which we just did in September. Jane, when do you initially present the budget here, just tentatively? August? So there will probably be some discussion next summer. Then there's more discussion in August and in September. In the meantime, we're doing discussions here with staff. We look at data. We really need to do our research. We need to look at what other school districts are doing, what's working, how do we deliver our instruction. If we cut a staff member, how would we continue to deliver that instruction and still be able to offer the same opportunities for the children here in our school district. So it's a delicate balance. I think our board here is very loud and clear that looking at expenses is definitely going to be done. Frankly, we wanted to get through the budgeting and the levy and kind of set the course with that. At the November board meeting, we will be having some discussions on the fund balance policy, as well as a couple other policies. So I think in answer to your question, there will be various times for community input, but that's not till later on. There's a lot of work that we have to get done and research that needs to be done first.
Well, perhaps more specifically, you have a consultant engaged now to assist in the long-range plan definition. Is any part of that assignment that they've been given pertain to this? In other words, will they be looking at opportunities for expense containment as part of their charter?
No. That might be something that might come from a goal where we would have that, but that is not what ECRA's been hired to do, no.
Is it too late to change the emphasis of the charter, that you I believe it's a $35,000 to $50,000 contract, am I correct? And they're just now getting started.
The emphasis is educating kids here, and I think one of the goals from that will be a financial goal. And once that goal is set through getting input from everybody in the community, and we really want everyone involved in this, then the goal will come out from that, and that's when we will be asking for more support from the community in possibly looking at things like that. But ECRA itself is not, their job is to get all the input from the community and the surveys and really give us the data so that the board can set the goals.
Okay, thank you.
And there will be continuous updates on that. There's postcards, at least there were postcards on the table. You should have all received a postcard in the mail. There's information on our website. The only thing we ask, if you can do it, is to RSVP to Liz, and please, please come and share your feedback and input next week in our strategic planning sessions. Thank you, Mr. McAveen.
I just wanted to comment that I had a similar question to him when we did the contract with ECRA, and it was explained to me that that's part of the implementation, right? And so what she's saying is it's not in phase one, which is what we're in right now. It is, we believe out of phase one, we will get several goals as adopted by community input. And one of those goals is very likely to be financial, right? Reducing or containing expenditures. As a result of the community input, we will set those goals, and then there is another phase where committees will help us figure out how to carry those goals forward. That's my understanding based on
Exactly what I said.
Okay.
My name's Peter White. I live at 400 East Sheridan Place in Lake Bluff. First of all, I'd like to congratulate the board on 2 accounts. One, for not spending the entire surplus, so thank you very much. That's a good problem to have, how we deal with it. And secondly, for the hard work that you've undertaken so far and the harder work that you will have to undertake in the future. I looked at the Concerned Lake Bluff Taxpayers document that recently appeared on the Gazebo News, and I'd just like to confirm that the board recognizes that these numbers are in fact an accurate representation of the Sun-Times website. My point is that if we agree on these numbers clearly, and not to be redundant or overly redundant, which is probably being redundant. Apparently I didn't get my education in Lake Bluff. Which goes to the point that if these numbers are in fact accurate, although this did not happen on this board's watch, we as taxpayers are spending 62% more than these other districts for arguably the same outcome. To the point of the previous gentleman, I think it's incumbent on this board to go back and understand how we got in this position, how the taxpayers in Lake Bluff only get a return on their investment of about 33.4%, while these other communities, on average, if you average the 3 there, that are getting about 54% return on their investment. That's a significant difference. That's about a 60% difference. So as you struggle with, yes, we have a tremendous surplus, good for us, how do we get some of that back to the taxpayer? I think you also have to go back and dissect out how we got in this position with the spending to begin with, and what we can do about it in the future, and why the return on the investment for the tax dollars that the Lake Bluff taxpayer pays are not maximized. Thank you.
I do want to share that on our, this voice is going. On our website, we have a lot of information, and one of the charts that's on there is about fund balances and different things in the North Shore school districts. So I think oftentimes, and the information is accurate, but sometimes it's the districts that you choose too. And I think as educators, the exciting thing is we all do try to learn and borrow good ideas from each other. So that's something we will always reach out. But for our context, there's other districts around here that also fit in with us. I'm not saying that's right, wrong, or indifferent. I'm just stating the facts with that.
I think, just to clarify, this came up earlier, I just wanted to clarify it one more time. The numbers that people are citing has that $6 million construction number in there, correct, Jane? So if you back that out and you do a per student thing, that takes about $2,000 per student away from the numbers that are being quoted by everybody today, which is not exactly the same as the other districts, but much more in line on this data. So we're not really seeing an apples-to-apples comparison with the data because of that $6 million construction expenditure. If we were to normalize it, it would be more like $14,000 or so per student versus the 13 for Green Oaks, the 13.4 for Deerfield, and the 13.1 for Wilmette. So it's not like, it's still higher, I'm not arguing that point, but it's not as high as people would say in this one analysis that's been provided by the concerned taxpayers. So we get the message, I get the message personally, but I just want to make sure that when we are quoting numbers, we are doing our best to try to get apples-to-apples comparison. And again, Jane clarified that a little earlier, so this data doesn't reflect the clarification.
With that being said, though, I think as we look at our strategic plan, we get our goals in place, we really have outside eyes looking in, we gather input from the community as to what do we value for our kids in this community, and we have to look at everything. Everything is really subject for review, and that's healthy for organizations to do. We just have to be thoughtful in the decisions we make because they involve children, and they involve children in their education, so thank you.
Just picking up on what Terry said, I think as you'll see in the new district report card, our numbers, our percent expense for instruction in this most recent report card show 52.5%, which is much more in line with these, even the districts that are quoted here, and these aren't all the districts, obviously, they're the ones that have been chosen, and I'm pointing to the concerned taxpayer posting here. So I do think as other districts' information comes out, and as you get the corrected information off of our district report card, I think that concerned taxpayers do a great job of bringing up issues and identifying issues. I'm not sure that we're comparing apples to apples here, as Terry says. So the other number I haven't been able to figure out where it comes from is this 19,200, because that's not what are in the report cards. And so I just think there's a lot of data here to go through. And one of the issues is that $6.6 million that's in these numbers that shouldn't be, or throws off the percentages substantially.
Thank you, Susan. Did you have a comment?
I did. Megan Miles, I'm at 803 Jenkinson in Lake Bluff. And I feel like as a parent in the community that I wanted to make sure that the board heard some of our voices as well, because we live in Lake Bluff and not Libertyville and not Lake Forest and not several other local communities because of the amazing school district that's here. And I feel like it's a huge draw to people buying houses, to our real estate selling faster, to just contributions to the community. So I understand we need to be fiscally responsible and that is incredibly important, but at the same time, small class sizes and spending more per kid is what everybody's looking for. So I just wanted to encourage you in that there are other voices to hear within the community that feel pretty strongly about that as well.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions?
Hello, good evening. Randy Pickell, 116 East Prospect. And my question really is pursuant to the issues that are being discussed tonight relative to your decision on tax abatement, whatnot. And I think John mentioned earlier, the first thing that jumped out at me as I looked at this was just the numbers on the bottom in terms of what percentage are we shooting for. And I would expect our board and our leaders to really understand what a fiscally responsible benchmark is. And I'm guessing that we could compare other school districts as John has. And so my question is, what information can you share with us tonight that you have found in your research, and what is a target that you should be shooting for? I understand that you don't have a policy at this point, but I hope if we've gotten to the point of having 5 plans in place, that we do have some reasonable or well thought out target that we're shooting for. So that's my question for the group.
Do you want to start and then I'll jump in, or do you want me to start? I'll do either one.
Jane, first of all, could you clarify the statute regarding fund balance in terms of a minimum?
There's no statute. There's no statute.
Correct. There is no statute for maximum.
There's guideline. There's no statute for maximum. No, absolutely not. And there are guidelines the state board provides as far as scoring a district's financial health, and they indicate a minimum of 25%. That's 25% of revenues, though. And we're talking about a percentage of expenditures, because I think that's easier for all of us to understand kind of how we work. You know, how many months of expenditures do you have in your savings account, et cetera. That's what we're working from. Our board doesn't have a policy or a guideline on a maximum acceptable fund balance. It's something the board, I know, at least for the last 3 or 4 years, has been asking about and talking about. And we have not addressed that concern. We certainly are addressing it now, and Dr. Sophie's leadership, we are going down that avenue. We're going to reach that. We don't have a guideline, so yeah, we're all over the place with these. That's because I'm trying to give the board as many scenarios as I can, to give them as much information as I can so they can make an informed decision. the 2012 levy isn't going to determine what your ultimate fund balances are. It's only going to affect the next school year, the next fiscal year. So to develop the policy through a very thorough and methodical manner and doing some research, and where the board is comfortable in future years, is a discussion they need to have, not in 1 or 2 meetings, but over a period of time. We can do this. Again, you can only adopt a levy for 2012. You can lower that levy to have some impact on the current fund balances that we have. Then going forward, once you have a policy or a guideline in place for a maximum fund balance, it's going to make future levies, budgeting, et cetera, not necessarily easier, but certainly with a better roadmap to follow.
That's a good synopsis, and I would share that as a superintendent, we go with the guidelines from the state, and the state has said minimum of 25%. We're in a position, we're going through strategic planning. It's a very philosophical question that I think we're going to need to address, and I really think that it needs to be thought about and talked about over a couple months span, and in the process of doing that, there wasn't enough time to really think and get all these possibilities for providing some kind of tax relief and a reduction in surplus while talking about fund balance. So I did state a couple weeks ago that for the first year, and I think until we really understand what's going to be happening at the state level, if we ever understand what happens at the state level with financing, we're most comfortable as administrators with 50%. We can provide some immediate relief. We can reduce our surplus, and we can still provide a great education for our kids here while we're developing our strategic plan and talking about our fund balance and looking at all of our expenditures. So that's what we know in answer to that question.
Can I just add one thing to that? We recently saw a table, a bar chart that I don't have in front of me now.
It's on the website.
That, I don't remember exactly how current it was, but it was fairly recent. And I don't remember where the gentleman was sitting who asked the question, but you'll find if you find that chart, fund balance, at least from there must have been 15 data points on there, different school districts in the area. The range was huge from, school districts that are broke and have no fund balance to districts that have more than a year on hand. And the chart that we saw, which is whatever, I don't know exactly how current it is, but we were right in the middle range on fund balances in terms of months of funds on hand. So that's a preliminary chart, and we'll be digging in a lot more, but that is available somewhere on our website.
100% of the fund balance is not in line with anybody. I've looked at this end on end. I've never seen anyone. I mean, there's a lot of controversy about that from the Chicago school districts. But let me make a suggestion here. If 50% is the number, why don't we do case E over again and hit for 50 instead of 60?
Pardon?
Why don't we take, the lowest I saw was case E, correct, Jane? And that in 2018 gets us to 57.7. Why don't we make that 50?
John, I think that comes back to that discussion of the working cash balance and what we do with that, whether we need one or don't need one. That's what we talked about earlier. So I think that's
build it in.
Well, I'm just saying if you took that away, I think it would be 50.
That is certainly something we will be taking into consideration as we look at our.
And the other thing I just want to say, especially to you, Gene, because you've raised it a couple times. Most of us here no longer have children in the elementary school, but I'm a product of the public school system. My kids were a product. There's nothing we would do negative to affect the education of our kids. What we're saying is that the kids in Libertyville and the kids in Vernon Hills score equal to what the kids in Lake Bluff do, and they pay about half of what we do for that education. And all I'm suggesting is that we take a serious look at that and attempt to understand what the variables are and why we're different. Keep this, no one wants to see the educational process change in a negative way. That'd be the last thing we'd want to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm I'm Cal Stroh, 330 Ravine Forest Drive. I understand, as one woman pointed out, that there are people who move here specifically because we have a good school system. But I also know that there are people who have lived here decades of their life who have to move away because they can no longer afford the taxes. And I know absolutely that there are people who don't move here with school-age children because, again, they can't afford the taxes. So I realize you walk a tightrope, but somehow there has to be some accommodation there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jill Rosa from 216 West Center. And Dr. Sophie, you've mentioned the upcoming strategic plan, and I was emailing both of you today a bit about that. And I just want to point out, I was involved in the strategic plan in 2009, and this fiscal issue was covered in it, and one of the strategies that we chose in 2009 states, we will, in partnership with our community, develop and implement a fiscal austerity plan that emphasizes and preserves our educational mission. And the intent of that, from the committee that developed from that, was to maintain a 25% operating fund balance at the end of 5 years. And I don't know what became of that or that committee. I don't know what became of any of the committees from the fiscal plan. They kind of dissolved after a couple years, maybe through changes to the superintendent or administration. Documents seem to have been lost, and I would like to urge the board to put into place some sort of mechanism where we create this plan. We spend a lot of time developing it. We say we want fiscal austerity, and then nothing happens in the next 3 years. You know, put in place something to make sure that what the community says is actually enforced and put into place the way we say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Porter Bogus at 221 East North Avenue. Jane, I had a quick question on the movement in Plan D and E, moving into the working fund. Is that basically constructing a sinking fund? Or no? It's hard to put you on the spot. I know.
Let me try to understand your question. We're moving.
So moving the surplus into the working fund.
The debt service fund.
Debt service fund, that's right.
Yes.
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 Sorry.
Yes.
So is that creating a sinking fund in essence, and
Fund.
sinking fund where you're prepaying, essentially setting aside in escrow the payment of the principal of the bond and interest up until that?
Yes, it's
not called that.
We're just transferring the funds to
internally, right?
Internally to the debt service fund, which its sole purpose is to exist to pay the principal and interest payments. And so doing that and passing a resolution tells the county clerk not to collect taxes from our taxpayers to make those payments. Otherwise, they automatically extend the taxes.
I understand.
Okay.
So my question is, though, is that would be booking it towards, say, this every year there's 2.37 mil that comes due, and the interest on that, and that's just.
Yes, we're not going to pay in advance. We're going to put that money into the debt service fund and make the payments as they are already scheduled to be paid.
Yeah, well, I know, you can't
Okay.
move it out. I understand
Okay.
that. You can't change the covenant of the bond.
Correct.
So by setting it aside, I'm just trying to see whether, down the road, whether there's a balloon payment in 2018 where everything has to be kicked back up.
Not through this process, there is not. Now, when we just refunded bonds in 2010, it moved a payment to 2028 of
yeah.
2.1 million or something, yeah. But the regular amortization schedule calls for payments to be of that size by that time.
Yes. But I'm getting to the point I'm
I'm
getting
sure
at.
everybody's like, oh, wow, this is exciting. But
No, the point I'm getting to, though, at
Yes.
2018, in these different scenarios, the
Yes.
5-year plans, that when the rate kicks back up.
Okay, yes, that's
You
the
see where I'm-
caveat, that's the caveat.
Yeah,
That's
when it kicks
correct.
back up.
When we no longer abate that, then yes, that rate's going to hit the tax bills. Because
Again,
now, yes.
because you still
So
have,
it's a
you still have,
temporary.
you still have all those years that you still have to
Correct,
fill in the
correct,
void.
correct.
Unless you address it
Unless-
continually.
Exactly.
Correct.
And continually peel it, or add to it
Yes.
if there are surpluses.
Yes, or they could, the board could ease it back in, rather than after the first year making 100% of the payment, the following year, let's only make 80% of the payment, the next year 60%.
Any way you
Kind of
wanna-
build it back up.
yes.
That would be one way that would.
Make it less painful.
Correct.
But it's still, you have it out there.
Correct.
And the refinance issue, the hard part is, it's not so much the negative arbitrage, it's getting the existing bond players, the bond owners who do not want to give up
Don't
that
get-
coupon.
I would assume so, yes.
So they're the ones who, that's the reason, that's the hard part with trying to pre-fund the bonds, is getting everybody in the same room and say, oh yeah, I want less money. It doesn't work very well.
Does that answer?
Yes,
Okay.
that's primarily what I want to get. Thank you.
Other comments?
No.
No?
My name is Kevin Dacre. I live at 425 Lincoln Avenue, Lake Bluff. And I have to, I think, reiterate what Porter is saying. I mean, if we have a surplus and we have debt, we take the surplus immediately, apply it to the debt, and rewrite the debt. I mean, why should we put money in an account that's not going to get us much interest? Well, we're paying above market rate interest rates, only to pay that off over time. I mean, it doesn't make any fiscal sense at all. And I don't know if arbitrage is, a word, but I don't think it really pertains to this. This is just basic finance. If we've got a $7 million surplus and we can put it to our debt and make our debt go away or shrink by 50% and refinance at market rates, that's a great option. I think it's worth looking into. Thank you.
You want to address that at all? You want to address that?
It's my understanding that we are looking into it, and it depends on the terms under which we have the
did
bonds.
address it last
To clarify, we actually had a lengthy presentation last meeting about that, and there are options that are not available to us currently that would be in 2018, and there are other options that cannot be exercised at this point in time, but we did have a lengthy discussion with our William Blair bond representative.
Do you want to share?
I'll just make a comment on that, the bonds that are issued, the municipal bonds have a maturity date for each bond series, and they're not callable unless that's written into the bond when they're issued. So these bonds don't have a call date, and I think it's 2017 or 18. I apologize, I don't know the next call date, but they can't be prepaid like your mortgage where you can refinance at any time. These bonds have to be outstanding, paying the current coupon rate until the call date. So they don't have the option of calling those in and paying them now. They're not callable yet. So they did look at that, and Blair did present those options and explain that last time. I don't know if that's on your website, the last presentation, but that might be helpful.
I think we put that on, yes. I think we did. Thank you.
Are they the financial advisor? The underwriter, are they the advisor?
Any other questions or comments? Look at yours.
Anyone? Well, I'd like to finish up by saying thank you to everyone who came this evening to offer your comments, your insights, your thoughtful suggestions. All of these are considerations that the board will be discussing in our November committee of the whole meeting. I want to clarify something Jane said, and I think we repeated it several times this evening. The decision that we'll be making is for the 2012 levy. That is for the amount that will become your tax bill in 2013 for District 65. The additional consideration that we're talking about is the debt service situation. That's a decision that we'll have to make and notify the county about that. So these are the two things that we can impact now. Someone asked about the multi-year plan. We're talking about several multi-year plans, but those will not be anything that we will be voting on in the next several months. We may make commitments to those, or we may try to decide that this is the plan we're going to strive to be on as we get more information. As we said, when we find out, probably in January, some issues regarding pension reform or shift of responsibility. We will be discussing the levy further in our committee of the whole meeting on November 6th. We'll be voting on the levy on November 13th. Strategic planning. Okay.
At the November regular meeting, the board is going to adopt a resolution of estimated levy. I just want to get the technical wording. You will approve the actual final levy, which will be identical to the November resolution, but that will be done in December, okay? Because you have to adopt the resolution of estimated levy, and then we have to have a 21-day grace period and publicized notices, et cetera. So I just want to make sure.
So technically, the end vote will occur in December, but for all practical purposes, it occurs on November 13th.
Correct.
In terms of the decisions that we'll make. Strategic planning is underway, as we talked about this evening, will continue through the end of this year. It's really in the data collection phase currently. We'll then be setting vision, goals, things like that, which is then, as Susan pointed out, following that, we start talking about action plans and committees and budgets that go along with our vision and mission. So we'd appreciate it if everyone here would be involved and bring your neighbors, friends. Next year, when we have this discussion, we'll have significantly more information guiding us. We'll have a newly developed strategic plan. We'll have an approved, presumably, an approved policy for fund balance. Beyond that, this is the first of our town hall meetings. We anticipate there will be more, and we appreciate the fact that everyone took time out of their evening to come and be a part of this. And to the people who've been a part of this for the last several months, we really appreciate it. It's much more meaningful to have a meeting with people here. So we appreciate that. And with that being said, if anybody has any other questions or comments, and if not, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.